joining us for our second regional webinar on the updated Tribal Mitigation Plan Review Guide. Just want to go through some of the changes, what we've done with the review guide since the 2010 release, and just to make sure at least we address, I'll say some of your questions. I realize there always may be specific ones to your situation in the tribe and how to meet those requirements. If we can't answer them today on the phone, I'm always welcome, or Amanda Syok here in Region 10, we're always welcome to a one-on-one call to help address your questions and needs. So with that, today just want to provide an overview of hazard mitigation planning, kind of give a little bit bigger picture, describe what's included in the FEMA Tribal Mitigation Plan Review Guide, and discuss the rollout of the guide and the resources for additional information. By now, hopefully you've had a chance to look at this guide. We've provided links for download from the FEMA library. If you haven't had a chance, I really encourage you to take a look through it, understand what's in it. I do want to, even though I'm going to talk about this later, I do want to make sure you understand the Tribal Review Guide, the initial audience is for a FEMA reviewer to look through to make sure that the plans are meeting our planning requirements in the Code of Federal Regulations. It's our interpretation of the regulations, but of course it is also for the plan developer to help make sure that those requirements are being met. What's not in here though is, it's not really used necessarily to develop an entire plan. You don't see a ton of best practices. We've kind of pulled that out here. We do have a separate handbook in development that I hope in the next year will be completed that really help drive good best practices for developing a plan. In lieu of that, of course, this is available to you. So let's get going here on, tribal hazard mitigation planning overview, kind of get some terms, make sure we're familiar with, and, just kind of set that foundation. So hazard mitigation, what is it? How does it even differ from response, preparedness, recovery? Hazard mitigation is a sustained action taken to reduce or eliminate the long-term risk to human life and property from hazards. Key part as you look at this, sustained action, long-term risk. So, if we think about land use and trying to get people out of harm's way, building in a safe manner where a tsunami doesn't come in and hit, or you're out of harm's way from a landslide. You're also looking at how we build in a way that the building doesn't collapse, even not just for safety, but also for function. So, strong building codes. So looking at those projects, the land use component, of course, around that education of educating people to make those choices, make those informed decisions. That might differ from getting a fire engine, putting, sprinklers in, where really maybe it's about, just that, preparing for the response. And those actions that are really just about the time that the hazards hit. What we like to do for mitigation is recognizing response needed. We recognize that hopefully there won't have to be recovery aspects to it because there hasn't been the impacts there. A hazard hit and there was very minimal to no impact. It's challenging, no doubt. But hazard mitigation planning is this process we go through to help address where do we make these decisions of where we're going to reduce risk. So the planning piece is a coordinated process used by state, tribal, local governments where you identify your risk and vulnerabilities. That's your foundational part, and associated with natural disasters to develop and implement strategies to reduce or eliminate long-term risk. So planning is that process. Such a key part here as you guys think about updating your plan or developing your first-time tribal plan is the process. Who should be there? Make it inclusive. Even as a tribe, you have communities that are there, whether it's local governments, you have nonprofits, you have state agencies. Bringing them into the fold to help inform those decisions. And then the outcome of this is a plan, which is a community-driven living document that the tribal government can use to strengthen and protect its land and people. This plan isn't just completed and it's put on a shelf. Like many other plans, you want to go through it at some sort of intervals, regular intervals. As things change when there's a disaster, perhaps fundings become available. Maybe there's a change in local leadership, tribal leadership. You want to come through and look at the plan, see what you've been doing. Don't let it just sit off to the side. So planning supports the tribal communities in a variety of ways. Of course, there to help make sure that the economy stays strong and that the impacts from disasters aren't big impacts, or minimal or little, to help preserve, cultural preservation of the lands and keeping the people together so that the impact of a disaster isn't coming and impacting where people have to move away. And of course, it's protecting the environment in terms of maybe floodplain restoration. And so it's not about minimizing flood, but salmon habitat restoration, for example, and safety. Of course, it's about protecting land, but it's about protecting people too, and getting them out of harm's way. So what's in as a mitigation plan? Of course, for those of you who might have already developed one, this might be familiar to you. But for those who are just looking at this or just thinking about it for the first time, a plan would have a description of the planning process you went through, who was involved, when were the meetings, how long did it take, timelines and time frames, the assessment of the natural hazard risk. First of all, what natural hazards impact you? But then within that, based on what's important to you as a tribe, where are your vulnerabilities and risks? This becomes a foundational piece in which you build your strategies. Your long-term strategy with mitigation actions is put in there, and then we want to understand the mitigation capabilities on how you might implement those strategies. Capabilities are, the human resources. Who do you have available? Engineering, planning, funding-wise. What about your programs and policies that are in place that might influence the actions that you can take and do within house, or maybe you have to go to external stakeholders such as state, federal government, other tribes, other nonprofits. And then your implementation approach. For each of your strategies, what's going to be the funding sources, who's going to help do this, what are your time frames? And so they vary in content, the specifics here, but this is an overview of what you would find in a mitigation plan. So mitigation plans for tribes, they can come in a couple different approaches. We can have a single jurisdiction where the plan is developed just for the tribal government. This is most often what we do see, especially here in Region 10 in Idaho, Alaska, and Washington. You can do a multi-jurisdictional approach where the tribal government may develop a plan with other tribal governments, and so it's a multi-jurisdictional, or you would have a tribal government develop a plan with local communities. We've had a couple of tribes here in Washington that have done that, but mostly you see that in Alaska where the native villages and the cities or borough are doing them jointly. I want you to recognize whether it's a single jurisdiction or multi-jurisdictional, this does not impact if you decide to come direct to FEMA for any assistance in terms of going for a disaster declaration, or you're going to go for some PDM funding or whatnot. It's still the same planning requirement that tribes will meet, whether it's single or multi-jurisdictional. But these are the choices the tribe's going to have to make before they come and decide to develop their own plan. So what are the requirements? Why do we do this from a basic level? Now, we mentioned earlier why we'd want to go through the planning process and do these, when we talk about preserving, cultural preservation and safety, protecting people and the community and safety. But there are grants and funding behind this of why you may or may not need to have an approved tribal mitigation plan. So this chart is just showing. So, for example, individual assistance, these are all FEMA programs. And so just to put out there, we do a plan because of the FEMA programs. This isn't affecting some of the other programs right now, but individual assistance, would you need one if you're going to come direct to FEMA or to the state? No, you do not need a plan for that. Public assistance, now you can see generally it says no, unless you're going to come direct to FEMA and you want categories 3 funding for category C through G. Now, this isn't a public assistance webinar, but there is a lot of funding opportunity to rebuild infrastructure through those categories, those projects. So it really is important to have a plan in place and approved prior to disaster. Coming down to our pre-disaster mitigation grant program, do you need a plan? Well, yes, if you want to come to us direct for some project grants or even through the state. So in both instances, you would need it. So you can see where there's yes or no, And we're always welcome to talk to you individually about where you're at with your planning process, what type of funding opportunities you're looking for, and if you need a plan when you apply or if you don't. So, and this is also in our tribal guidance. So introducing the plan review guide. What's in it? What are some of those changes that you might be, especially if you're familiar with the 2010 guide and you're looking at this new one. So this is FEMA's official source for defining the tribal mitigation plan and requirements. It supersedes the March 2010 one that many of you might be familiar with. It's been the main guidance that we've had. We've said the audience is the plan reviewers, the tribal governments, only because, as you're looking through this, you want to make sure that you've met those requirements in there. It does provide a standard operating procedure for plan reviews. So, for example, just what's the process we go through, the plan review tool, and so on and so forth. What this is also, this is our interpretation from the regulation. So, just to be clear, the Code of Federal Regulations have not changed. We didn't make any changes to what is under 201.7 or 44 CFR 201.7. Those remain the same. The interpretation of some of those requirements has changed, and we'll get into that. But otherwise, that remains all the same. So we released this on December 5th of 2017. Officially, it's effective December 5th of 2018. There's a couple of links here, which when we send these webinars out later, you can, or the PowerPoint later, you can go ahead and click on them. But what it essentially means is this year grace period. If you're currently working on a plan and you think you'll have it submitted prior to December 5th of 2018, you'll have a choice of the 2010 guidance or this 2017 guidance. Anything submitted after December 5th of 2018, you will need to adhere to this updated guidance using the new review tool. So again, you're more than welcome to talk to us about where you're at with your current update to your plan or first-time development of a plan, perhaps where you are with your grant, and we have that discussion of what you would prefer in terms of using the 2010 or 2017. So we've done quite a bit of outreach on this, on the update to this guidance. So in 2017, we did a number of events, 23 events, on looking at the proposed changes that FEMA would be making. We did have 300 comments submitted for the updated guidance. They were reviewed. Some were incorporated into the guidance. Some of them really weren't specific to our requirements, but might have been better into our handbook that we're updating. And so some of these comments that we've been receiving, we've still kept those as we are considering this development of a handbook. In 2017, we did have a draft review guide out. We did 8 different events, webinars throughout the country with 60 comments received at that time. So if you've looked into our review guide, this is a general organization, introduction. We go through the standard tribal mitigation plan requirements. That is currently what all tribes have. In addition, we have enhanced mitigation plan requirements. We'll go through that here in just a little bit. There are no tribes currently in the nation that have enhanced status, but what we've offered here is some clarification. It's always been available to tribes. But I don't think in the past it's been as clear what that looks like because the CFR is written for the state. And so we didn't really provide a lot of good guidance in the past. We've done much better in this updated guide on each tribe who wants to be enhanced. What does that look like? And then we have some appendices in here. The review tool, submittal review procedures, an approval letter template, so on and so forth. For those in Region 10, we can make sure, well, I'll say anybody joining us from anywhere, we can always get you the Word version of the review tool, which we strongly encourage. You can always go into the PDF and extract it, but it always kind of messes up the formatting. But we have the review tool for you guys. Make sure you get in touch with us to get a copy of that. Okay, so what are we looking at here in our 2 different elements, standard and enhanced? So for the standard plan elements, it's broken out by the planning process, and those requirements specific to the process. You have the hazard identification risk assessment, the HIRA or the HIVA, You have the mitigation strategy in element C. Element D is for those that are doing plan updates only. So these are those, you've already done a first-time plan, you're doing your update, whether it's the second, third time, fourth time, you will be addressing those in element D. And then element E is about the assurances and plan adoption. Then we have our enhanced plan elements that are in here under elements F through I. What you do have is the element I is really specific to your grants management performance, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, whereas the other ones are much more around capabilities, discussion, policies, and integration with other departments and agencies. So a quick summary of changes that I'll get into, focusing, we focus on the policy and requirement. We've introduced some guiding principles, clarify the probability of future hazard events. We've interpreted the enhanced plan requirements for tribes, updated plan review tool, and documented submittal and review procedures. So the focus on the policy requirements. So in 2010, we included guidance for requirements. So in our Code of Federal Regulations, you have what's called the word must or shall, and then the recommendations, which we use the word should. We also included samples and approaches for plan development. We've streamlined this for our 2017 guidance. The focus is on the requirements that are required, what we call the must and shall ones, not the should or the should requirements where, they're recommended, but you didn't have to do them. We've kind of cut that out. The state plan still can't do it, but for our purposes of reviewing the plan, we've streamlined this to just what is required. We've limited the scope of the document, of course, the interpretation of requirements, and when I was talking about our samples and different approaches, we pulled them out and we're going to incorporate those into this handbook. Now, for those of you that might be familiar with the local mitigation planning handbook, that is what we're developing. That will be for the tribal mitigation plans. In lieu of not having the tribal one, I always recommend is referencing that local mitigation planning handbook. There's still a lot of great information in there in developing your plans, handouts, things like that. And so we're basing that for our tribes. Again, it's still about a year out before we are able to get that released. This is a sample from our guide. The content or the format really does resemble a lot from both our state and local review guide, and so we've adopted the same one for the tribal one. So you can see on the left side, it will say the requirement, which like here is at A7, that the plan include a discussion of how the tribe government will continue public participation. We provide, well, what's the intent of this particular requirement or element, and then how to meet that is under the requirements column. So the plan shall include how the tribal government will continue to seek. Examples include but are not limited to, and then here's a few examples. This isn't going to show every specific way to meet the requirement. That's still going to be up for some interpretation within regions and the plan reviewers. Of course, internally in FEMA, we're always trying to work together to be as consistent as possible. But this is going to provide some of that, main guidance of how to meet it. Always welcome a discussion, though, specifically if you guys aren't sure if this is meeting the requirement or not. We provide an introduction of guiding principles, and again, this is following up with what we've done with both our local and state. I won't go through. I'm going to give you the highlights or the headings here, but each one of these, so there's much more specifics within the guidance here. But that's a nation to nation of FEMA committing itself to building stronger and lasting partnerships with tribal governments, fostering cooperation and understanding, especially through the communication, through our reviews, making sure it's constructive in a positive manner. A focus on mitigation strategy. We recognize that the development of risk assessment is important, but that's your foundational piece, and your strategy really becomes important, building upon that risk assessment and what you'll be doing to reduce your risk. We want to consider the intent while reviewing the plan, and that we're looking at the whole plan itself, the process, the hazard identification, risk assessment, mitigation strategy, and not just the specific individual requirements. We're looking at the processes that are important as the plan itself. We accept that Each tribe might take a different planning process. We recognize that what occurs up in an Alaska Native village may look different than a tribe out in eastern Washington from the planning process perspective. And we also recognize this is the tribe's plan. And so we will do our best effort, just recognizing the effort and interest of each tribal government that develops the plan, and that, it's not a cookie cutter, one type of approach for all tribes. Or another change you'll see in our guidance is the clarification of probability of future events. This builds upon what is in the updated state mitigation planning guidance. So in here, it says that the plan shall include the probability of future events for each identified hazard. Probability must include considerations of future conditions, including the effect of long-term changes in weather patterns on identified hazards. So we've always asked the 2010 guidance and before that, probability is, of course, considered. But with the main part here is the effect of long-term changes in weather. So what we're just asking in here, as you're thinking about, future flooding, coastal erosion, it's not just looking about what has happened in the past, but in the future, does it increase or decrease, get exacerbated due to just, different climate conditions that are occurring. This can be done in either a qualitative or quantitative approach. We are developing in region some clarification on what this can look like, providing some examples. We don't have that currently, but I know people have had a lot of questions about this. So what we've seen here, there's an example here about, extreme temperature, some very general description about that. Number of days may increase, and, the average annual extreme cold days the average annual extreme cold days are the number of days per year in which the low temperature drops below freezing. Freezing temperatures can cause winter storms to occur at low temperatures, and it may increase. So, we'll look to provide, again, a little bit more clarification on this year. But if you guys have questions as you're currently developing your plan, please reach out to us. The enhanced requirements, so we provided interpretation in the 2010 guidance. It did say, it just says that we'll discuss enhanced tribal plans with special considerations. It didn't get really specific. And so what we've done here is provide some clarification for the tribes and some enhanced plan review procedures, recognizing that when it's your first time coming in, what does that process look like? Because it is not a typical process as if you were having your plan reviewed for just meeting the standard plan requirements. So here's what this, we do have the guidance in Code of Federal Regulations 2.1.5. Talk about integrated planning, making sure that the different sectors that are identified in the mitigation framework aren't just identified, but are truly integrating. Talking about the different FEMA mitigation programs and initiatives and how you're using that funding and also integrating within those programs. We're looking at the tribal mitigation capabilities. What do you have in terms of you're making a commitment to a comprehensive mitigation program, ability to implement those programs, and the use of existing programs. And then, of course, HMA, or Hazard Mitigation Assistance Grants Management Performance, which we do look at how you're meeting your grants capabilities. Are you actually, submitting reports on time? Are you doing it within correct, time frames, period of performances? Are you doing accurate environmental reviews, benefit cost analysis? The enhanced choice, for those who may not understand, it is getting states who have gone enhanced are getting an additional 5% funding. So traditionally, they might be getting 15 when there's a disaster declaration. They would get 15% in HMGP funds, and they'd be getting 20% is what they'd be getting. So that's the kind of things you need to weigh, is if you're going to be getting a disaster declaration or thinking about that, what additional work do you have to do to be enhanced, and of course how that would equate to that extra 5%. But in meeting this, being enhanced doesn't mean it's something you will be doing. This is stuff that you have been doing and consistently been doing this. And so when you're going to be an enhanced tribe, you're telling us your story of how you're already meeting all these requirements. This is still pretty vague. I know these are just bullet points, but if you're interested in becoming enhanced, we really encourage you to reach out to us first, myself, and we can talk through what these different capabilities or different requirements are and how you can possibly meet them. We do have the updated plan review tool. So this is the 2010 one that was out there. We generally call it the review crosswalk. And so that has been updated. This is the one that we have in Region 10. I put the Region 10 name on there, but it's pretty much what it looks like across the nation. But again, just streamlining it in terms of meeting the requirements of meeting only what's required, location of the plan has been met or not met. So again, email me for a copy of the Word versions of that tool. And then the other one is our document submit and review procedures. We just provide clarification, especially if you'll be submitting up through the state for review, and then it will come to FEMA, or if you'll submit direct to FEMA for review. So we provide some clarification on that. So some next steps and some common questions we've heard. So let me go through, as we've mentioned, regulations have not changed. If you're in the process, what policy should I follow? Regulations haven't changed. Just remember that. Plans submitted before December 5th, you still have a choice. If they're submitted after December 5th, you will want to adhere to the 2017 guidance. As you can see, the only really change in there would be the future conditions and the probability, and that's just a little bit more clarification that we'd be asking for or additional information. But otherwise, everything really does look the same on this guidance, and I would actually think it'd be easier to use than the 2010 one. So my recommendation, of course, is even if you're submitting it tomorrow, use the 2017 guidance. And give us a call or reach out to the state if you'll be working through the state on your updated or first-time mitigation plan. So when you're looking to learn more, at this point, we've done 2 regional webinars. It's our second one. There was a national webinar on this. If you're in other regions, I know there's some webinars or in-person presentations they're doing, but I don't have those with me right now. I recommend you reach out to myself or the state for technical assistance or advice on the guidance and just the general requirements that we have there. We are offering a series of workshops in Region 10 that you're more than welcome to attend. They are both for local, state, and tribe members, officials to attend. And you can see maybe where there might be one near you or works for you. If you have a current FEMA planning grant, there's a possibility those funds could be used to travel to any of these locations to learn more about the requirements. And this isn't just about requirements, but these are also about best practices and learning from each other when we do these 2-day in-person workshops. And where can you find more resources? Series of resources and links here. Again, when we send this off, you're more than welcome to take a look at these and click on them for information. And our last slide here, a number of people. I hate to overwhelm you with people who to reach out to, but depend on how and who you're comfortable with speaking to. You have myself and Amanda Syok with our Region 10 Mitigation Planning team. You have Aaron, Ramona, Jay, and Aurora with our Region 10 Tribal Affairs team to reach out to. And, of course, our state mitigation planners for Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington that you can reach out to on our requirements. And you can always reach out to anybody about what's in the within our review guidance, any of the trainings, or any clarifying questions, especially around the FEMA grants and eligibility for those grants, or going for disaster declaration. Do I need a plan or do I not? And those kind of questions. So with that, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate your time, and have a great day.